Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Butch Shorak. It's Options University, and it's Friday, July 20th, 2012. Access to this webinar or video is for educational and informational purposes. Nothing contained in this video, website, or promotional material constitutes a promotion, recommendation, solicitation, or offer of any particular investment, security, or transaction. Options University provides educational services that are meant to teach you the risks and rewards of trading stocks and options, and we are not a service that tells you what to trade. We're not implying or guaranteeing any profit, and as always, do not trade with money that you cannot afford to lose. Here we are, we're in the third week, option expiration week of the SPX of the month of July. First months of a quarter tend to be the stronger months of the quarter and usually open to be somewhat bullish, and we see that as we look at the first month of the quarter. We're basically exactly where we started at the beginning of the quarter. We've had our dip where we've pulled back, and we see now that we have been in an up cycle. And as we look at our overall trend, we broke out getting higher highs and higher lows. There's a high, there's a high, there's a higher high, and we're at a transition point as we look at this Friday morning of options expiration week, and we see that we could break out of this zone and head to higher highs, continuing the upward trend in the market. The next trend, of course, after an upward trend is a sideways trend, and so far we are trading in basically our summer trading zone. And we're going to find out whether we're going to break up and head toward previous highs, that previous high being up there right around 1410, 1415, which we see from this point right back here. So, current trend of the market, we are in an uptrend. We're getting higher highs, so we're getting higher lows, and we're approaching those highs which we saw earlier in May. Transition point today on Friday, are we going to go higher? Are we going to go sideways? Or are we going to begin a downward cycle in this upward trend, and will the upper movement continue on the lows as we keep getting higher lows? And so this first month of the quarter has shown to be a strong month, and typically you'll see in the market that the first quarter of the month ends up being a stronger month. Let's look in particular at the week that just took place, and we'll expand our chart a little bit as we look at it. And here we see we had 4 trading days so far. So we had a huge day last Friday, and then what we saw is we continued after that breakout, and we had our pivot here where we changed direction into an upward cycle, and we see that each of the days during the week so far has been a nice upward move, and we're currently sitting at resistance. So now the question is, what's going to happen on this Friday options expiration week? And again, utilize that signal which we use so often, that is that opening range which takes place in the first hour. Are we going to trade above that opening high of the first hour, or are we going to trade below that opening low of the first hour? And use that as an indicator for your Friday trading as we go into this summer weekend. Alright, so the SPX, nice strength this week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. All nice strong days in option expiration week as we come up to our previous highs that were here at the beginning of July. If we talk about July so far, where have we gone? Absolutely nowhere. With that in mind, let's move on and take a look at some of the other indices and see how they've fared compared to our granddaddy index, the SPX. Looking at the Dow, we see that we have exactly the same pattern. We've been in a nice little bullish movement. We're in an upcycle, and you see that we are basically sitting at that same high that we saw back there at the beginning of July, basically going nowhere so far in the month. But holding our own in this first month of the quarter, which tends to be a bit of a bullish month anyway, so we could certainly see higher highs based upon past history. And when we look at the NASDAQ, we see the NASDAQ looks exactly the same. Had a kind of a wild day here on Tuesday, where we had an outside day, and that did occur during this week, showed us a lot of strength and showed us that underlying power of the bulls that took place during this last week. Next, let's take a look at the Russell 2000 and see that this market is lagging a bit as we look back and we look at the beginning of July. We see that it is lagging and not keeping up with the other indices, and gave us a big red candlestick on Thursday. Many times the NASDAQ can be a leading indicator for these pivot moves. So watch that opening range this morning and use that as an indicator for where the market's going on this option expiration day. Next, let's take a look at the VIX, and we see that as we go out into an upcycle, we're trading at the very low range of our yellow zone on the VIX as we're pulling back, and a lot of the fear is out of the market as the market rises, and that is to be expected. Again, back in our normal zone between 20 and 15, where the VIX trades approximately 15% of the time. Remember, this is our fear index, and we're interested in the extremes, and the fear is coming a bit out of the market, so we are basically due for some kind of movement up in the VIX, which would of course mean that we're getting a little overbought in the overall market. All right, next let's take a look at some of the ETFs that we look to follow some of the other sectors, and we see that the bonds have been holding very strongly as the bond market in the last year and couple years has really outperformed expectations, and we see that we're very near the high of our range for the bonds, and as if the market begins to pull back, we could see these bonds actually move a little bit higher as we could break out of that trading zone. So you could watch that carefully. Looking at the XLF, which is the financial sector, we're in the midst of earnings season, and the financials have been returning very nicely, certainly beating in general the expectations on earnings, not necessarily beating the expectations on revenues, which seems to be a bit of a pattern as we're about a week and a half into this current earnings season. Financials looking strong at the very high of its current range, and we will need a breakout in order to get higher highs out of the financials as we are still trading in our zone. Next, as we look at oil, we see that oil has been rallying as the dollar has been getting weaker, and we see that we have broken out of this previous low area that typically we don't see during the summer, when we usually see a seasonal rise in the price of oil just so that they can make a little more money off the summer travels. All right, that gives us USO, the ETF that we look at to help us trace oil. Next, let's take a look at that ETF for gold, and we see that we're trading smack dab in the middle of our summer trading range. Been trading here since May, and so one of the things you might look at is a potential condor looking at oil, or looking at gold as it trades in this zone for the summer, and probably will stay there until it changes. And will it change? Yeah, of course it always changes, but meanwhile it looks like a real potential for possibly an iron condor. All right, next day let's take a look at the spider, see that it is following in the same movements that we see out of the SPX, but it does allow us to add one little analysis to our overall analysis, and that is what kind of volume. And we're in our summer doldrums, where we see that our volume is basically right around average. No big movements there as far as volume as we continue through with our summer trading. So the SPX this week has had a nice strong week, getting up to previous highs, finishing into auction expiration week approximately where we started the month, and we see that we have basically about the same position as we had at the beginning of the month, and getting a bit overbought, and we unless the trend changes and we move into a breakout, we should see this retrace back, and we'll then see whether we get a breakdown from our upward going diagonal and come back down to some lower lows. So that we're kind of in a flux point as we enter into this Friday of options expiration, and it's great having you here with Options University. And for those of you that are gold members, we'll be looking at our stocks to watch and see what they've done during this bullish week in options expiration week of 2012. So to those of you that are not gold members, we look forward to seeing you when we come out with more news again on Monday, looking at the week to come. And if you'd like to see more free videos, go to www.optionsuniversity.com/free gold. With that, this is Butch Shorek. It's Friday, July 20th, 2012. Options University appreciates you being here, and thank you.